Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 22nd of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by going to 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information line, or find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. When you can't find what you want, or you have a question about something you've seen on our websites, on our Alaska Weather Information line recording, or on the Alaska Weather Show, feel free to let me know. david.snyder@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you any time of the year. Let's take a look at the hazards going on around Alaska at this hour. Up north, we are still looking at winter weather advisories for the northwest and northeastern Brooks Range there, looking for gusts on the order of about 35 miles per hour. Because of that, the snow might be blowing around enough to maybe drop visibility there as you're moving along the Dalton Highway or any of the passes. So don't be surprised to pick up a gust from time to time. That should last until about 6 o'clock in the morning or so. Some high winds are also moving through the Alaska range there. The amount of snow has not been blowing around quite so much, so yesterday this was a little bit of a higher priority with the snow and blowing snow. Now it's mainly a wind problem, and gusts there could be blowing through the region on the order of about 65 miles per hour or so, especially along the Richardson Highway between Black Rapids and Fort Greely and into the Denali region. So don't be surprised to see some stronger gusts on the order of 65 miles per hour or so as those winds continue. That'll go until about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning as well. A look out to the west shows that the Bering Strait region as well as St. Lawrence Island is under a winter storm warning. I'll back up here and get a little bit. There we go. St. Lawrence Island and the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. Winter storm warnings there for about 4 to 6 inches of snow. The other issue, though, is the gusts up to about 80 miles per hour. The strong winds going through the region are going to be blowing and drifting snow around. And on top of that, you could be dealing with some ice mixed in with that. That'll continue until about tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow morning, I should say, 6 o'clock in the morning for the winter storm warning. So plan on that for St. Lawrence Island and the western and southern end of the Seward Peninsula. 4 to 6 inches of snow and strong and gusty winds. The Yukon Delta also looking at the potential of some snow and ice there, just minor amounts of ice, but again, you could be looking at about 4 to 6 inches of snow there. And as we look at the Bristol Bay region, also looking at a high wind warning that's going to expire this afternoon. The winds will still be blustery, but it looks like the strongest winds have passed. So some improving weather for the areas around Bristol Bay. The other thing to be concerned about is the coastal flood advisory for the St. Lawrence Island area. You're looking at about high tides above 3 to 6 feet above normal high tide levels there. That'll be for tonight and into tomorrow morning. So some coastal flooding may be possible with those strong winds blowing through your region already on top of the winter storm warning. So an awful lot going on for our western communities. And here is why. Let's take a look at the satellite picture. And you can see several waves of low pressure just stacked one right after the other moving on that northwesterly flow. This is all due to the jet stream making a huge upside down U-shaped pattern across Alaska. This is the dry side of the pattern. This is the active side of the pattern. And St. Lawrence Island, you are right in the middle of it here. That strong southerly flow is bringing a lot of moisture through the region, certainly some moderate turbulence at times, perhaps even some isolated severe turbulence across the west. That's going to continue. You'll see that in our aviation maps here in just a few moments. And it's also keeping a lot of wind moving through the chain in the Alaska Peninsula. So as we get into the marine maps here in just a little bit, you'll notice those strong winds going through. It looks like periods of snow will continue for really most of the weekend, but the overall trend is really toward a drier one. And if you're in eastern Alaska, you are going to be affected by high pressure that's out across the western sections of Canada. That's a lot more typical of winter weather for this time of the year than what we're really seeing out here across the west. Your morning low temperatures are going to be well below zero, and daytime temperatures might struggle to get to zero. And for many in southeast, perhaps some breezy conditions from time to time, but the bulk of the really big wind is out here across west and northwestern Alaska. So there's our high pressure system, a 1,047 millibar high. And if you have friends out of state in the lower 48 and they're saying, oh, it looks like it's going to get colder, and you're kind of laughing at them a little bit, this is where the cold is coming from. So you can say, yeah, we sent that to you as an early Christmas gift. 1,047 millibar high there. That's also pushing a little bit of dry air across southeast, keeping things probably a visual flight rule for a good part of the weekend in southeast for sure. For many in the west, Seward Peninsula is really taking this one on the chin. A lot of wind moving through. You can see the tight pressure gradient here. Low pressure's off to the west, another wave of low pressure outside of Bristol Bay, and periods of rain moving through Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. As we get into tonight, that moisture channel is still moving across southwestern Alaska, and there's just enough warm air that there could be a hint of freezing rain in places like the Yukon Delta, maybe even the St. Lawrence Island there. A little better chance that'll be snow, but this entire region here is just kind of on the precipitation fence. It's almost all snow, but not quite, just too warm. And areas of blowing snow will be an issue too with that wind and the snow combined. Of course, winter storm warnings there remain in effect. Out across the west, snow showers and unsettled for the central and western chain. As we get into Saturday, you notice these black dash lines there. We don't always tell you exactly what all these things mean, but it's always a good idea to have a refresher in case you don't know. These are troughs of low pressure, so a front has a difference in temperature on either side. So here's one front, here's another front, here's another front. This cold front, for example, has cold air behind it, and the arrows point the direction it's going. So the front is moving this way. And this is a poor example because it's just barely moving southward. And that's the idea. Cold air is behind it. A front has a pressure difference, a moisture difference, a wind shift, and a temperature difference here. So this is a cold front moving this way, and it is in an area of low pressure. These black lines, getting back to that, are also areas of low pressure, but they don't have a big temperature difference. They do have a wind shift. They have a pressure difference. This is an area of low pressure. And they don't have much of a moisture difference. Sometimes they can. But if you want to have all those things together, you can call it a weather front. If you want to just go with the pressure difference and the wind shift, we call it a weather trough. So these troughs are changing the wind direction. And if you're a pilot, you probably know that on the lee side of these, or the downwind side, that's where you can get into some turbulence or some wave actions off the mountains. And that's really what's doing a lot of this here, is the higher terrain causing some of those areas of low pressure on the lee side. So long weather lesson there, but that's why we draw them on the map, so you know what kind of weather to expect. Here is an occluded front. That means the cold air has caught up with the warm air as it's wrapping around low pressure to the left. And that 994 millibar low is moving northward as we get into Sunday. You can see that getting closer to the coastline. Across the outer coast. I expect that to continue. Rainfall there slowly creeping in on southeast, but it looks like you'll see more clouds and any wet weather as we get into your Sunday afternoon, so I wouldn't cancel the weekend plans just yet. And there is that cold front, the leading edge of colder air slowly sagging southward. Try saying that 5 times fast, and it doesn't really budge a whole lot, though, into mainland Alaska just yet for the weekend. Along the south, though, you can see that warmer air is gradually lifting northward. We're back into the kind of a rain-snow mix around the Alaska Peninsula. The Kenai Peninsula is looking at some snow, and it looks like a lot of this is going to try and work its way northward as we go through your Sunday. High pressure, though, is in charge across the upper Tanana Valley, 1,030 millibars, and there may be some hints of fog in there. When you check on the flying weather maps here in just a few minutes with me, keep your eye open for this area here around the Copper River Valley where there may be some IFR issues in the morning. Didn't see a whole lot of that, I think, this morning, so it might be hit and miss, but if you're trying to fly through this region in the next couple days, it could be an issue the next couple days because it will be cold and there will be some areas of cold and wet air trapped down below. Here's your Saturday morning temperatures, anywhere from 5 to 30 below across the upper Tanana and upper Yukon valleys. Look at that. Fort Yukon down to 19 below, 30 below in Northway. Now we're talking winter. It's about time. 20s to about 30 degrees for parts of southeast and generally clear. Out across southwest, mid to upper 30s, even 40 degrees around King Salmon and Dillingham. The North Slope, you're looking at single-digit temps in the Beaufort, teens and 20s for the Chukchi Seacoast and the Kotzebue Sound, Shishmaref 25, St. Paul 30. As we get into high temperatures for Saturday, back in the teens for the Tanana Valley. Same for the North Slope, though. 30s and 40s for southwest. South Central, you're back in the lower to mid-30s. Kodiak 43. Southeast, generally 30s. Some outer coast places like Sitka closer to 40 degrees. Sunday morning, back in the cold again. 21 below in Fort Yukon, 9 below in Fairbanks, 10 below for Northway, or Eagle, I should say, and 0 in Barrow, 6 for Kaktovik, 24 in Nome, and 30s, just low 30s though for Bristol Bay, 29 in Kodiak. Dutch Harbor starting at 29 up to 35 on Sunday. Mid-teens for many in the middle Tanana Valley. South Central 20s and 30s, near 40 in Kodiak, and mainly mid to upper 30s for parts of Southeast going into Sunday afternoon.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. Watch for patchy areas of IFR around the Copper River Valley as we start up tomorrow. We didn't see a whole lot of that today, but it is possible that with a substantial high pressure across the western provinces here, we could certainly lock in some low-level cloud cover and make that a little bit tricky to get through places like Dehne Pass and maybe up toward Mentasta Pass. So keep an eye on it. Check the FAA weather cams and the observations, of course, before you fly. This could change, and again, didn't have a easy time getting started today. Out across the west coast, that stream of southerly warm and wet air is still going to persist in the morning for Saturday. Watch for that stream of IFR close to the YK Delta coastline, the Alaska Peninsula, and into the eastern chain with MVFR as well as Kodiak Island. As we get into the afternoon on Saturday, watch for MVFR to spread across a little bit more of the Gulf. VFR conditions continue for southeast. A large part of south central gone is that region around the Copper River Valley now. And for the interior, it looks like pretty smooth and clear sailing there. IFR around Nunivak Island out towards St. Matthew and into the Bering Strait. As you look at Sunday morning, IFR conditions return to St. Lawrence Island and Nunivak Island and around some parts of southwest, the Alaska Peninsula, the western Alaska chain, as well as the Kenai Peninsula. And there's our morning fog once again, potentially back for Sunday morning. As we get into Sunday afternoon, we start to see MVFR spreading into central and southern parts of southeast, as well as a large part of south central and the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet, all the way over to Lake Iliamna. Nunivak Island, St. Paul and St. George, and the central and eastern chain up to St. Lawrence Island and the Beaufort Seacoast. So a little bit of change as we go through the weekend, but not as widespread with that big target of IFR across the west. So some improvements going into the weekend. Pass conditions, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass expecting to be VFR for your Saturday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass a little different. Lake Clark probably MVFR to IFR, while Merrill Pass could hold at VFR conditions through a large part of the day. That'll hold in the southern end of the passes. Rainy Pass on the northern side of all that looks pretty good. VFR conditions there, as well as Windy Pass on into Isabel Pass and Mentasta Pass right now looking good. Remember though, there could be some fog on the south side of that, so keep your eyes on changing conditions tomorrow morning and again on Sunday. Dehne Pass, we're going to go a little bit with a slightly better chance of seeing some fog on the eastern side of this again, so watch for that, but it could all wash out and be VFR for you tomorrow all day long too. So a lot of possibilities there. Portage Pass, VFR conditions, and Chilkoot and White Pass as you would expect, VFR flying tomorrow. Freezing levels show that warm and wet air is kind of moving once again a little bit to the east. We have a pocket of warm air across the interior and the north slope. Those levels anywhere from 2,000 feet to a little bit south of the Brooks Range to as high as 6,000 feet west of Fort Yukon and north of Fairbanks. That is some substantially warm air. No wonder places like Barrow set record highs yesterday. Across the central and eastern Gulfs, 4,000 even 6,000 to 8,000 feet for freezing levels, generally along on the outer coast of southeast, in southeast itself between 2,000 and about 4,000 feet. The surface freezing line over Nome, the Bering Strait, all the way down to the central chain, and right through southeast, Sitka to about Ketchikan for your daytime tomorrow. Here's a look at the icing potential, anywhere from about 6,000 to 8,000 feet for this zone of moisture across the west coast. Some of that could reach considerable moderate. More widespread area of isolated moderate from the Bering Strait region, St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island to Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and as far east as about Homer, maybe just south of Nikilski and probably Kodiak Island there. That'll be most of your day on Saturday. Everything else is really, really bone dry. The jet stream shows us why. High pressure is anchored now up across the Beaufort Sea. Trough of low pressure across the Bering, but the storm track is taking everything across the North Pacific and then shoving that warm air across the Bering Strait. This is bad news for Chukchi ice and great news if your friends and relatives in the lower 48 are saying, where's the cold? We want some snow for Christmas. Well, this is the kind of weather pattern that could do that while it's chewing up the white and winter out across the west coast of Alaska. South and easterly winds across the mainland of Alaska now. It looks like 40 to 60 knots at their highest around the Alaska Range, 85 knots across some parts of the western Alaska Range. Slower wind speeds across southeast and the Alcan border. A southerly flow across the Brooks Range at 25 knots there, up to 50 to 60 out to the west, and westerlies across the central chain at 3,000 feet. Southeasterly winds here, strongest across the Gulf, anywhere from 30 to 60, 50 to 60 knots across the central and western coast, and 60 knots across the Bering Sea, with low pressure south and west of Kodiak Island and east of the chain, bringing in 50-knot winds there from the north and east. So we still have another day of potentially severe turbulence across the west, maybe the Kenai Peninsula and maybe the western Brooks Range below 5 to about 8,000 feet. So hold on to the yoke and be careful out there. We'll be back with marine weather in just a few minutes.
It used to be that you could only warn one person about a tornado after it had already blown down someone else's barn.
Now, on average, we're able to issue a tornado warning 15 minutes before the tornado's even there, and that wouldn't be happening without Doppler radar.
This NexRad system has reduced fatalities on the order of 45% due to tornadoes since its advent.
We have a lot more information now about storms and being able to understand how they develop, how they produce severe weather, and how that information might be used to improve warnings for our National Weather Service partners.
The lab is unique in that we serve the nation by supporting the National Weather Service in its mission to protect lives and safe property by improving the accuracy and the lead time of severe weather warnings.
We have a legacy of radar research and converting existing technology from military to weather purposes.
A recycled Doppler radar led to the development of NexRad, installed nationwide in the early 90s. It allowed forecasters to see storms like never before.
Not only did we help bring that technology to the National Weather Service and to help protect lives and property, but we have continued to upgrade that technology, keep it relevant, and keep it state-of-the-art.
Recently, a major upgrade was added. Dual polarization technology takes the radar from 2D to 3D. Forecasters now know more about what type of precipitation is falling, which is very helpful during winter storms, as well as how much rain is accumulating, resulting in better flash flood warnings. The radar can also detect and track tornadoes based on debris. Looking to the future, the National Severe Storms Lab is testing the capabilities of phased array radar. Originally used by the U.S. Navy, the antenna scans the skies electronically rather than mechanically, allowing the radar to focus on a storm.
With current technology, we get a full picture or image of what is going on within a storm every 4 to 5 minutes. So it's more like a snapshot. Whereas with phased array radar, we get that picture of what's going on in the storm every minute. So it becomes more like watching a movie. So we can do adaptive, rapid scanning on the storms that matter most, being able to provide the information that's most relevant when and where it's happening.
Another advantage of phased array radar is its multifunction capability, providing weather and air traffic information simultaneously.
Number one, it is a system that promises to replace and expand upon the existing weather surveillance radars. Secondly, to replace aging air traffic surveillance radars. And number three, it offers a potential application to meet Department of Homeland Security and defense requirements for identifying and tracking non-cooperative aircraft. With the replacement of all these various radars with a single system, the American taxpayer could realize substantial savings in cost.
You have a lot fewer radars to maintain, and the electronic capability of this also reduces maintenance costs because you do not have moving parts.
Not too long ago, the ability to predict severe weather was thought to be impossible. During the past several decades, research conducted at the National Severe Storms Lab has developed life-saving tools like Doppler radar. We've progressed from no warning of threatening weather to about a 15-minute lead time, and current research promises to extend that much further.
Our knowledge of severe storms and how they behave, and our use and ability to use the Doppler radar technology is in a lot of cases a direct result of that close working relationship, that research to operations component that we get between the National Severe Storms Laboratory and a forecast office.
That history and understanding of how these data can be used by our users and doing the research to help advance the use of radar technology, really it's what we live for, it's in our lifeblood, it's in our history.
It's now easier than ever to be a part of weather research. We just launched the mPing app for both iPhone and Android users, and it's totally free. PING, which stands for Precipitation Identification Near the Ground, is a research project by the NOAA National Severe Storms Lab and the University of Oklahoma. With the mobile app, you can send us your weather observations on the go. Are snowflakes falling on your head? Is hail hitting your car? Just select what type of precipitation is falling and press submit. It's that easy. It takes about 5 seconds and it's anonymous. Reports can then be viewed online. Our scientists will compare your report with what the radar has detected. This helps us develop new radar technologies and techniques. Download the app today, share your reports, and let's work together to make our nation weather ready. Learn more here and follow us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. That warm south wind has punched a hole in the ice across the Chukchi Sea. This warm and wet weather will continue across this region at least for the next day or so. And because of that, this hole may grow even further north and west. But after that, after we get into next week, it looks like high pressure may settle in. The winds will calm, and as we were talking about yesterday, the sea surface temperatures are primed and ready to create more ice. And once that happens, this should freeze over fairly quickly and return at least to more of a covered state. Maybe not normal state, but closer or on the way. You can always check the latest weather conditions there at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice and get the latest sea ice outlook as well. Be sure and do that sometime this weekend. Here's a look at southeast, and the inside passages should see light winds and small seas, 2 to 3 feet there. General northerly winds coming down from the Lynn Canal and all the way into Stevens Passage. Southeasterlies light inside of Clarence Strait. Offshore winds, though, will be stronger. Remember, we've got cold high pressure up here across the western provinces, blowing air down the hills and keeping skies clear, but the offshore winds might be a little bit stronger there. Look for 12 to 13 foot seas across the outside coast. Then we get to Sunday, and that offshore wind continues 20 to 30 knots. Seas come up a little bit more, 14 to 17 feet. And with low pressure in the Gulf, things are going to start to change. Weather's going to start creeping in from the west as we go through the remainder of your weekend. And inside waters, now the winds start to come up a little bit more there too. 15 to 20 knots and 3 to 4 foot seas should be expected by Sunday. Here's a look at Saturday across South Central. A strong easterly flow, storm force winds there across outside areas of Resurrection Bay and into the Barren Islands, 22 to 25 foot seas. Easterly strong inside of Prince William Sound, 6 foot seas there. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet, really picking up south of Calgon Island. As we get into Sunday, the winds diminish a little bit, 25 to 30 knots in all areas, 4 foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, 5 to 7 foot seas inside of Cook Inlet, and 25 to 30 knot winds from the south and east across the northwestern Gulf, looking at 16 to 17 foot seas there. In Bristol Bay, 45 knots with 12 foot seas, but down the coast, much higher seas, 19 feet there with a northerly flow at 45 knots. Low pressure once again just right here, and that's keeping the winds really stirred up and going strong. 45 to 50 knots across the Pacific coast, 40 knots inside of Shelikof Strait with a 14-foot sea, anywhere from 19 to 26-foot seas across the Pacific coast. By Sunday, not a whole lot of changes. Winds do diminish, but we're still looking at high seas down the Bering Sea and the Pacific coastline. 16 to 18-foot seas. There's 6-foot seas, some improvement in Shelikof Strait with the easterly down to 25, 30 knots inside of Bristol Bay with a 9-foot sea and 15-foot seas down the coast on your Sunday. For Saturday, look for northwesterly strongest around Unalaska to Nikolsky, 45 to 50 knots on either side, 17 to 18-foot seas. To the west, much better until you get to Kiska. And westward towards Shemya, it's a southwest wind at 40 coming back up to with 14-foot seas. Otherwise, 11 to 14-foot seas across the central and eastern chain. By Sunday, the main activity starting to settle down across the central and western areas, 25 to 30 knots, 35 knots north of Atka and Adak, with 12 to 14-foot seas in the region, 12-foot seas south of Adak and Nikolsky. And then once you get out toward Nikolsky and Unalaska, the seas come up a little bit more. It's pushing us back into that 20-foot range there. You see 10-foot seas around this general region here, but east of that, as you head toward the Alaska Peninsula, seas should be coming up sharply. As you get into Saturday, look for the higher seas east of the Pribilofs and south of Nunivak Island, 14 to 15-foot seas. There's some areas might see as high as 20-foot seas there, as you see on the scale. Anywhere from 10 to 15-foot seas across the general Bering region. Offshore winds will be strongest south of Nunivak Island and into the Kuskokwim Delta. Look for seas to diminish and winds to gradually subside. North and westerlies coming ashore on Sunday. Easterlies north of Nunivak Island and toward St. Lawrence Island at 25 to 30 knots, and northerlies around the Pribilofs down to 15 with an 8-foot sea on Sunday. Across the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20 from the south and east over the ice. Southeasterlies will be much stronger around the Chukchi, 20 to 35 knots with 10-foot seas around the Bering Strait communities and St. Lawrence Island on Saturday. That improves a little bit on Sunday. An east and southeasterly wind 20 to 25 with 4-foot seas to as high as 11-foot seas in the region. The Beaufort Sea looking at east and southeasterlies 10 to 15. Recapping tonight's weather, winter storm warnings continue for the Bering Strait communities down toward the Yukon Delta, where you might actually see a little bit of ice mixed in with your snow. 4 to 6 inches in general for those regions, as long as some very gusty winds throughout the region tonight and into early tomorrow. High wind warnings for the Alaska range on either side, mainly the passes there. If you're going over the Richardson Highway, you're going to notice that. Up north, also winter weather advisories for the Brooks Range and some of the passes there. Don't look for a whole lot of snow or rain in southeast. Clear sailing, but the winds will pick up and clouds creep into southeast as we get toward the end of the weekend. Most of the snow and rain will be out across the west and southwest.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.